This is Richard Luce back of the Self Protection Essentials. This video actually ended up as 2 episodes. I'm currently using the free version of YouTube, and that means my episodes are limited to 15 minutes in length, maximum. This one ended up going to be about 24 minutes, so I'm cutting this one at around 13 minutes, and the remainder will be on another episode that I'll list as part 2. I hope you don't mind that. I just couldn't figure any decent way to put it all into 15 minutes. So with that said, let's go ahead and start this episode. Thank you for watching. I was just watching a video where this guy dressed in a Highlander outfit, plaid, tartan, and sash and whatnot, like the Highlanders would wear over in Scotland, had with him a wooden staff. And he was telling us about how he uses the staff as part of his, like, walking around in the woods, partial survival kind of gear. Showed a whole bunch of really cool things that he was doing with it, and why he chose certain woods over certain other woods. He even had it set up where he put a sling on it, like the kind that you would normally hold in one hand, put a rock in a pouch, and then hold the other end, whirl it over your head and toss it. He would attach that to the end of his staff, and from the video, he was showing pretty good accuracy with that thing at very long ranges. Would it be accurate enough to kill a small animal in case he had to have some food? Possibly. He was definitely throwing a rock that would be heavy enough to do such a task. And I got to thinking, well, you know, I like wooden weapons. I'm a martial artist, 3rd degree black belt in Okinawan karate. I've made a lot of my own wooden weapons over the years, a bunch of them as gifts for students and whatnot. Maybe I should just take a moment and show a few of the things that I've done and a couple of my current designs and why I decided to change my designs. Now I'm going to start with the second oldest bow that I've got. And I put these on the ground, not realizing there were a bunch of these clingy seeds and whatnot, and the ground was a little bit damp. So hang on a second while I get this cleaned off. There we go. This one is a hardwood staff, and that's the only thing I know about it, that it's hardwood. I don't know which kind of hardwood. This one actually started out as a hardwood fluted curtain rod that I picked up over at Home Depot. And I was at that point in time learning how to use a martial arts bow, the Oriental phraseology for a staff. And I just grabbed it off the shelf, went, oh, this feels fairly hard. Yeah, so maybe I can use this in my bow class that I'm taking, because it has some good heft to it, and it turned out to last fairly well. Eventually I got around to sanding off it had fluting on it, the entire length. It was fluted, so it wasn't just a stick. Eventually I sanded off the fluting because it was just tearing my hands up. But because of the fluting, I decided to give it a name. I named it after a relatively famous football player named Doug Flutie. So this bow staff has a name of Doug, or Doug Flutie. It's been very durable, and since it's an unknown kind of a wood that I picked up dirt cheap at Home Depot, I decided to use this as my full contact bow. And it has worked very well in that role. It's a little bit on the heavy side. It feels a little bit heavier than red oak, but it might be red oak. I'm not really sure, like I said. So, 6 foot tall, solid wood bow staff. Now, another one that I made, that I actually made a bit more realistic as far as making as opposed to buying and sanding flutes off of it. And really quite different than most of the other bows that I made. I ended up falling in love with exotic woods. And this one, as you can tell, it's a lot lighter in color. This one is also a lot thinner than Doug. There. You can see it's a lot thinner. That makes it a lot lighter, but also the wood itself is a lot lighter. And I don't know if the camera will pick it up or not, but you might be able to see little nodules kind of thing going down the body of the bow. And that's because of the kind of wood it is. This wood is extremely flexible. And being very light, it's also very fast moving, which is a good thing if you're ever having to use it as a weapon against another person. As one of my instructors taught me, it's better to hit somebody 3 times with a light staff than it is to hit them once with a heavy one. The heavy one may cave in their head very thoroughly, but if the other guy hits you 2 or 3 times in the time that you're trying to hit him once, you're probably not going to hit him at all. So that heavy bow that'll deliver quite a punishing blow isn't going to be of much benefit. This is actually made of a wood called waxwood, which is a very flexible material. So while other woods, such as hickory, are very solid because of the way in which they're made and are very safe for the user because of how their grain is interwoven. See, most woods, the grain isn't interwoven, it's all straight. But when a bow that's made out of straight grain breaks, it shatters. With hickory, the grain is all interwoven, so if it breaks, it basically tears itself apart and very seldom will ever actually break into 2 individual pieces. And if it does, it's not going to be as sharp or as pointed as most other hardwoods. Even the other exotic hardwoods that I fell in love with. So this one is one that I really like. And if I've got somebody that is new to the martial arts and I'm teaching them how to use a bow, this would be one of the ones that I might give them. Because it is so light, it's easy for them to manipulate. The downside is it's so thin that sometimes they might have a hard time hanging on to it. So it would have to be a relatively small person that I would give this to. But even though it's really thin, because of its flexibility, if it were to take a blow, it would take it very well and not have a tendency to shatter like most hardwoods. Now, the next item I want to show you is not a bow staff. This one is a wooden sword after the Japanese design of a katana. Now, these, getting all these sticky things all over my hands, these were created by the Japanese back when samurais ruled the day. And the reason they created them is not because they're an excellent weapon to kill your opponent with, but they will do that. And it wasn't because they didn't have metal, oh, they most certainly did. they made these wooden swords, which are called bokken, because when you were training your warriors, you didn't want to train them with live-edged weapons. Well, they did that for a while, but they found out really fast that newbies, people who were learning the art, never having held a sword for any real practical purposes, when you came at them, eventually you would get past their guard and actually land the strike, and now you've got a soldier who's missing an arm or a head, depending upon where the blow went. So they decided, well, we can't be doing that. We'll make swords made out of wood, and that way, at least if I hit him in the arm, although the arm might break, it's not going to be severed off, and that broken arm can heal. And maybe if we train them right and we put some protective gear on their arms, the arms won't break. They still found out that these things can do a devastating amount of harm, and one of the greatest swordsmen to ever live, Miyamoto Musashi, actually went to several different dueling conflicts with his sword. This one time, he really had a disdain for his opponent, and instead of taking his sword with him, he left it at home. They were having a duel on an island, and Miyamoto Musashi arranged for another person to row him over to the island. I don't know, maybe that person was his second or whatever. But while he's in the process of getting to the island, he takes one of the oars, takes out a knife, shapes it into a wooden sword, and proceeds to have his duel with the wooden sword. His opponent was very, very insulted, at least for a little while. That insult didn't last very long because his opponent ended up dying because Musashi killed him with his wooden sword, with his bokken. Now, I don't have this because I'm really into sword work. I got it because other friends of mine had wooden swords, and it would be perhaps fun to learn a little bit about that. And I had already at that point in time been using a different variation on a wooden sword, and I thought, okay, let's give it a shot with one that's actually designed after a real sword. One day I had a back injury, and I was in my bedroom, ended up on the floor, didn't have a cane or anything like that nearby to get up off the ground, and noticed my bokken is laying there next to me. Actually, it was propped up against the wall. I knocked it over, reached over, grabbed it, and I didn't have the hilt on there. It was just the wooden stuff by itself. I grabbed it up near the top, put the point down into the carpet, and got up off the ground, off the floor, with greater ease than I had ever done with the cane. I was totally amazed. It turns out that a bokken is probably about 4 inches longer than the canes I was using. Of course, I couldn't use a cane that is 4 inches longer than what it is, because you can see from the bend of my arm that is just really uncommon for a cane. A cane is normally down here. So I go, wow. I started walking around with the cane for a while, but planting a wooden tip on ceramic tile just doesn't work out very well. I thought, I've got to do something where I can have a rubber foot on the bottom, like a cane does, for traction. Thank you for watching this first part. I appreciate your patience. In part 2, you'll hear how the work that I'm doing with wood has now grown into a slightly different direction. I think some of you may appreciate that episode more than you did this one, because it's got a little bit more of a practicality side to it. This is Richard Liebesbach of the Self Protection Essentials. Stay safe.